Thank you for joining us for the 2024 Football Online Rules module. My name is Jason Nickleby and I'm an Assistant Director with the League and the Director of the Officials Program. There are a number of items to cover in this module. Thank you for your diligence and patience as we prepare for the season in a few short weeks. Thank you for joining us for the 2024 Football Online Rules module. My name is Jason Nickleby and I'm an Assistant Director with the League and the Director of the Officials Program. There are a number of items to cover in this module. Thank you for your diligence and patience as we prepare for the season in a few short weeks. We will now cover some general and football specific information before moving on to the rule change for 2024. We will then be covering several editorial changes, the points of emphasis for this year, and a review of several rules that were passed in the last few years, and some administrative reminders before concluding this module. This is a reminder that air quality information was put into the league's policy last year, and it is only a recommendation. Even if levels are really high and the suggestion or recommendation is that the contest not be played, that is up to the host school to determine. So again, this is a recommendation, but our schools, coaches especially, should review air quality information as well as all weather-related items in our policy. In 2023, we had more weather and lightning related issues than we've had in quite a while. So it is important that coaches and officials understand what the policy says and what the expectations are for everyone if we have a situation with weather and lightning. Prior to the start of the contest, the host school is responsible for determining whether or not the conditions present a threat to the safety of participants and spectators and will determine whether or not the contest will begin. Once the contest begins, the officials have the authority to postpone or suspend a contest due to unsafe weather conditions. This also is the responsibility of the host school administration. If either administration or the officials see lightning, hear thunder, and determine that spectators, participants, etc., should vacate the area, then they need to come off, and that decision cannot be overruled. The 30-minute clock starts at that point and must go all the way to 0. If we see lightning or hear thunder again, the 30-minute clock starts over. No app, no individual can overrule this. We need to go all the way down to 0. So please be reminded of that expectation and don't try to pressure anyone into shortening that or making a different decision. We're going to err on the side of safety when it comes to the participants' health and safety. With lightning on the horizon, it should warn of potential danger, and if we have thunder or thunder alone, then that means there is an immediate danger to the athletes, officials, and spectators, and if you can hear it, clear it, should be used to make decisions to postpone or cancel the activity. Now, once we made the decision to pull the athletes, coaches, and spectators out of the competition area due to weather and lightning, then we need to, again, wait 30 minutes. It needs to get all the way down to 0. If we have lightning or thunder again, then the clock starts over. After the game has been postponed in this way, officials and coaches and administrators should communicate about next steps. Officials, please understand that you are working in outdoor sport and you may have games that will have delays. You should not look to cancel the game at the first opportunity. And coaches, officials should not be expected to stay around the site for several hours just in case you might be able to get the game in. So use common sense, communicate effectively about how we're going to resume, and if we have to stop for the night, then that's what has to happen, and make sure we communicate that with all involved. As a reminder, if a coach, parent, or other concerned party has an eligibility question, such as chemical or behavior issues, should direct those questions to the activities director. Even if a football player is ineligible, the officials are not ruling on bylaw or policy violations, and all inquiries should be directed to the activities director of the school involved. We are looking to add the concept of a pregame administrative and medical timeout during the 2024 season. This meeting will take place approximately 10 minutes before the contest begins and will hopefully be led by site administrators. This could also take place 30 minutes prior to kickoff in football because all coaches and officials and administrators should be on the field at that time. This meeting will cover sportsmanship, what to do with a challenging situation such as an unruly spectator or other disruption, as well as medical emergency planning. We hope this meeting will get administrators, coaches, and officials on the same page going into their respective contest. It is never acceptable for a coach to be ejected from a contest. You are responsible for modeling respectful behaviors at all times. Should a coach be ejected from a contest, they are ineligible to coach or play the remainder of games scheduled for that day and must sit out the next date after the date of the offense. This suspension must be enforced whether or not the school has received an ejection report. This is the responsibility of the head coach to notify their activities director. A violation of this rule results in a forfeit. A second ejection in the same season results in a 4-game suspension. Ejections may not be appealed. As you can see in the slide, a coach that has been suspended may not have access to the locker room, be seated or spectate in an area near the bench, or ride the bus to or from the contest. Obviously, if a coach is ejected from a visiting contest, they are allowed to ride the bus back to their school. However, they must vacate the playing area if they are ejected during the contest. The suspended piece of this, where you may not have access to the locker room or be in the bench area or ride the bus to or from the contest, is for the next game when you are suspended after the ejection. We don't have many ejections in Minnesota. However, we do have several situations where coaches cross the line and go on to the playing surface to argue calls, use profanity, and so forth. And again, we need to model the best behavior for our players primarily, but also for our spectators. If coaches are respectful and working with the officials well, then typically players and spectators follow suit. When coaches have lost control of their emotions, then we also see players and spectators do the same. So coaches, please work with officials, and officials are told to use respectful communication and work with you as well. But please model respectful behavior, work with the officials, and if we do that, we're going to have a great season. Athletes have similar consequences as coaches when they are ejected from a contest. They are ineligible to play in any game scheduled for the remainder of that day and must sit out the next contest that occurs after the date of the offense. This suspension must be enforced again whether or not your school has received an ejection report. The head coach is responsible for ensuring compliance with this bylaw. A violation of this rule results in a forfeit. A second ejection in the same season results in a 4-game suspension. Ejections may not be appealed. An athlete that is suspended during the regular season may travel with the team and occupy the bench area, but may not be in uniform. If an athlete is ejected from a game, whether it's regular season or postseason, they must stay in the bench area under the supervision of a coach. If they choose to leave the bench area on their own with a coach that is supervising them, that's up to them. But by rule, they are required to stay in the bench area under the supervision of a coach if they are ejected. Then in the next game, when they are suspended, then they may travel with the team and be in the bench area, but they can't be in uniform. If we have an ejection during the postseason and the player is thinking about coming to the next game, they may not be in uniform, they may not occupy the bench area, and they may not participate in the award ceremony or receive awards. That's an important distinction between ejections in the regular season as well as the postseason. So we've told officials and we're telling coaches that officials need to be diligent and work hard to only eject when necessary. But when behaviors or contact rises to the level of ejection, the expectation is that officials will apply NFHS rules appropriately and eject as necessary. We'll now cover the one NFHS rule change for the 2024 season. Each state high school association, including Minnesota, adopting these NFHS football rules is the sole and exclusive source of binding rule interpretations for contests that involve our member schools. So if you have any questions about interpretations of NFHS rules, you should reach out to your regional or state coordinator and our staff before contacting anyone else, because again, the state association is the sole provider of interpretations of NFHS playing rules. There is only one true rules change in 2024, and that is that jerseys of the home team shall all be the same dark color that clearly contrasts to white. So if you see on the screen here that the jersey for the home team is a dark color, be it black or whatever the darker color of your school's color scheme, and it clearly contrasts with the color of the number. And we'll talk about that more later in this module, but you'll see that the dark color clearly contrasts with white, the body color of the number, and the trim of the number doesn't matter. It's all about the body color of the number. But the main rules change is that all home team jerseys need to be of the same dark color that clearly contrasts to white or a light color. Here's another example of that. As you see on the picture here, that we have a blue jersey and a red. This is not legal because again, the home team must wear dark colors that are the same and they clearly contrast to the body color of the number. And apparently elsewhere in the country, they were allowing, say, defensive player of the week or the player who did the best at practice or those kinds of things to wear a different colored jersey because this language was previously not in the rules book. So now it is. That's the one change for this year. All players on the home team must wear the same color dark uniform top. And this is just another example. Again, must wear the same dark color. Under the previous rule, what you're seeing on the screen was technically legal, but now that's been cleaned up with this rules change. So again, this is not legal. All dark colors must be the same for the home team. We'll now cover the editorial changes for this year from the NFHS. This first change doesn't really affect Minnesota all that much because we have our own mechanics manual and we've been following this for quite a while. And I think officials in most states have been following this for a while. So the rules book is just catching up with that. It used to have a legal use of hands signal on the right being used for holding fouls, and everyone has come to know the signal on the left is used to indicate holding at all levels of football, and so the rules book is just catching up with past practice. I'm sure many of you have seen cases in high school and college and professional football where players are wearing multiple tooth and mouth protectors. And you would see that pretty prominently when a player is returning a punt, let's say, and you see one dangling from their face mask like you see on the picture, and that is now illegal. They must have one single tooth and mouth protector. The requirements for that haven't changed, but again, each player shall participate while wearing the following pieces of properly fitted equipment, and they need to be professionally manufactured, not altered, etc. And included in that is a single tooth and mouth protector. And if they have more than one, they need to be asked to remove that before they can participate. Religious medals and medical alert medals, such as the one shown on the play pick, are not considered jewelry, so they're therefore legal. However, there's some stipulations for those, and when it comes to religious items, religious medals, they must be taped to the body and worn under the uniform. And in the case of medical alert indicators and so forth, they must be taped to the body and they may be visible as you see on the play pick. So we have a medical alert there, it's taped to the body, no problem, and can be visible, but anything religious must be taped under the body. If it is any other kind of adornment from a jewelry perspective, that is not legal, and they are not allowed to participate again until they remove the jewelry, and that includes nose or ear piercings that were recently done. They are not to be worn in order to participate, but if it's a religious item, taped under the body, not visible, and in the case of medical alert, taped to the body but may be visible. The rules change last year to Rule 10.4 was a very significant change. In fact, it was possibly one of the most consequential rules changes in recent memory. But with that comes a lot of complexity, a lot of items that needed to be changed, addressed, language cleaned up, and so forth. And that was a major task last year, and we didn't get it all right. Um, as you probably recall, there was at least 10 to 2 slides that were sent out as corrections to the 2023 rules book. And now those changes were permanently added to the 2024 version. There's still some things we need to clean up. And if those things come up during the season, we certainly will communicate that with coaches and officials so that they know what's going on. But all of the slides that you're going to see relative to Rule 10.4 were cleaned up last year on the side, but after the rules book was published and are now permanently placed in the 2024 rules book. So this first one, the penalty for a foul that takes place anywhere on the defense and the end of the run is behind the previous spot, we're going to enforce that penalty from the previous spot. And in the old rules book, we had a situation where the quarterback would run into the end zone, get face masked there, and that wasn't changed to reflect previous spot enforcement. And it had the old enforcement, which was from the goal line. So this is just cleaning up the correct enforcement that if we have a foul on team B and the run ends behind the neutral zone, behind the line of scrimmage, we will enforce that penalty from the previous spot. In this case, the basic spot would be the end of the run or related run when team B commits a foul on a play where the run or related run ends beyond the line of scrimmage. So you see here that we have a run out to the 25-yard line, and behind the play, team B, number 4, commits a foul. We're going to enforce the penalty from the end of the run. So where that player gets tackled at the 25. So let's say it's a 15-yard penalty, we'd enforce it from the 25, and it's going to be 1st and 10 for team A at the 40-yard line. So again, not a change, just cleaning up editorially what we do on team B fouls when the run ends beyond the line of scrimmage. On this play, the basic spot is the end of the run or related run when the run or related run ends beyond the line of scrimmage and the foul occurs in advance of the end of the run or related run. So in this case, we have a run to the 25-yard line, but team B, number 4, commits a foul at the 30-yard line, which is beyond the end of the run. We're not going to enforce from the spot of the foul. We're going to enforce from the end of the run or related run. Now, some may be asking questions about what that means relative to related run. So let's take the same play. If the team A runner fumbles and then we have a foul during that run or during the loose ball, and team A or either team ends up with the ball, if we're going to enforce the penalty, it would be enforced from the spot of the fumble because that's the end of the related run. If in that situation, as I just described, if team A fumbles at the 25-yard line and team A picks it up and runs another 15, 20 yards downfield, the penalty is going to be declined because enforcement from the end of the related run would not be as good as the end of the last run. So that's the difference between end of run and end of the related run relative to penalty enforcement. On this one, the basic spot is the end of the run or related run for a foul that occurs beyond the end of the run or related run following a change of possession. So in this case, we have an interception. Team B runs it back to the 20-yard line where they are subsequently tackled, but either team A or B commits a foul beyond that end of the run. As you see there about the 10-yard line, we will enforce the penalty, whether it's Team A or Team B, we will enforce that penalty from the end of the run, which is at the 20-yard line. On this play, the basic spot is the end of the run or related run for a foul by Team A that occurs beyond the line of scrimmage during a running play. So in this case, we have the running back who runs to the 25-yard line and gets tackled, but downfield at the 30, Team A drags, let's say, drags the defensive player down by the face mask. We would enforce that from the 25-yard line, and in that case, a 15-yard penalty, half the distance from the end of the run, and whatever the down is going to be at that time would either be repeated, or if they made the line to gain after the enforcement, it would still be a first down for Team A. So again, a foul by Team A beyond the end of the run, we are going to enforce that penalty from the end of the run or related run. There were quite a number of editorial changes this year. We don't have separate slides for all of them, but they are listed here on this slide and the next slide as well. So we would encourage you to take a look at the 2024 rules book and um, look at these pieces. The main pieces to be aware of, especially for coaches, is this year, it is required that the body color of the number must clearly contrast to the color, the predominant color, the solid color of the jersey top. So that's been a 5-year implementation and is now going into effect, fully into effect this year. And then the other pieces to be aware of, coaches, for sure, is the NOCSE requirements on gloves, on footballs, other equipment, etc., or the NFHS logo on footballs. Um, those pieces are coming into effect this year as well. So those are the main changes to be aware of from an editorial perspective. Here's a few more editorial changes. Again, there's several of them. Just take a peek at them in the rules book so you have an understanding of what we're looking at. You know, one piece that is in there right now is further clarification on players that are defenseless, and we'll talk more about that in kind of the player safety slides later in this presentation, but just be aware of that. And then related run for enforcement spots for a legal forward pass. Um, we also cleaned up, again, 10-4, a lot of cleanup again. So take a peek at that so you understand what that looks like. And then there was also some further clarification on the use of marijuana, knowing that other states across the country have legalized that. That is something that is still not legal for coaches, officials, or players to use prior to or during a contest. And some more editorial changes. As mentioned, there was a bunch. And again, the penalty enforcement side of things was really cleaned up a ton. So check out 10.4, 10.5, the table, and really familiarize yourself with those and all the editorial changes. But the biggest change from an editorial perspective is to penalty enforcement. We will now cover some NFHS rules reminders, specifically when it comes to penalty enforcement and player safety from the past few years. This is a reminder of the change that was made several years ago, which goes into full effect in 2024, that the entire body of the number, so the continuous horizontal bar and vertical stroke, shall be a single solid color, and it needs to clearly contrast with the body color of the jersey. So you see in this picture example, we have a blue number that is on top of a white jersey. So this would be for the visiting team. And then for the home team, we have a dark color with a contrasting yellow color. Now, when it comes to clearly contrasting, having a dark color body of the number on a dark jersey or a light or white color of the number on a white jersey does not work for this rule and would be non-compliant. So coaches, when you are looking at ordering new jerseys, our strong recommendation is that you have the darkest color of your school's color scheme serve as the jersey color for your home games, with the body color of the number being white. And then for your visiting jerseys, the jerseys would be white, as that's required by rule, and then the body color of the number would be the darkest color of your school's color scheme. So that would be our strong recommendation. Your jerseys would be legal. You can hang on to them for several years, but again, this rule changed in 2019 and is now required in 2024. There was a change last year relative to towels, that they don't have to be the same color for all teammates, but just some reminders on the restrictions relative to towels. They can only have one manufacturer's logo. They can have only one school logo or trademark reference, and neither of those can exceed 2.5 square inches. Anything else besides those things on a towel is illegal, and players would need to remove that before they can participate. And then remember, or please note, the length and width requirements: no less than 4 inches wide and 12 inches in length. So you can't have a streamer basically, and then you also can't have anything greater than 18 inches wide and 36 inches long. So you basically can't have a giant towel. So um, those are the requirements for towels. This went into effect last year, and it's just a reminder relative to towels. And if they do not meet these specifications, again, players need to take them off before they can participate. A few years back, we did an experiment with Iowa on intentional grounding, and then the following season it was passed as a rules change with the NFHS, and then last year it was further modified to say that only the player who initially controls, possesses that snap has grounding protection. So let's start with the rule itself before we get into the exceptions. As long as the player who controls, possesses that initial snap gets outside of the free blocking zone, which is basically tackle to tackle, and then gets the pass either to the neutral zone or neutral zone extended, or to an area occupied by an eligible receiver. If they do that, it is not a foul for intentional grounding. It'll just be an incomplete pass, and we move on to the next down. Remember, we define an area occupied by an eligible receiver by giving them roughly 7 yards if they are coming back towards the ball, and 5 yards if they are going away and don't see the ball. That's going to be our guidance, kind of our benchmark for determining whether or not an eligible receiver is in the area. When in doubt, the passer is outside the free blocking zone. When in doubt, the pass made to the neutral zone or the neutral zone extended. And when in doubt, the pass is in an area occupied by an eligible receiver. Now, from the exception standpoint, and what doesn't apply in this rule is, again, a player that throws a pass not in an area occupied by an eligible receiver, and or possibly a player that does not control or possess the initial snap. So in this case on the screen, we have a snap that is controlled by A1, who then pitches it to A2. A2 runs out to the 40-yard line, finds no one open, and throws it in the stands. This is intentional grounding because that player does not have grounding protection because they did not control the initial snap. So if they throw it away, no eligible receiver in the area, it doesn't matter if the pass made the neutral zone, it is still a foul for intentional grounding. And remember that that is a spot foul, 5 yards from there, and a loss of down. So again, remember the rule language itself, remember the exceptions, and make sure, officials, for sure, you communicate about all of these pieces before we put a flag on the ground for intentional grounding. The NFHS has approved a new NFHS authenticating mark on footballs beginning this year, and you see the approved formats and images for the authenticating mark. Officials, we're not going to change what we're doing with this. You are checking the footballs, making sure they're legal by rule, and then marking the footballs that will be used during the game. Any football that is not approved by the crew and marked appropriately can be used during the game. Um, Schools, just make sure when you're ordering new footballs that it has the appropriate authenticating marks. And officials, we're still going to play the game if footballs don't have these marks, but we would like a contest report filed so that we can work with the school on getting footballs with the appropriate authenticating mark. So you see on the screen here, relative to authenticating marks, the NFHS logo on the right hand side is their new logo, and it's a little bit bigger in size, so you should be able to tell that it's there. But if the other football is used, again, make sure it's legal specifications wise, approve it, mark the football, and then file a contest report. But any football that meets specifications and has the new logo from the NFHS would be totally legal for play. We'll now cover the NFHS points of emphasis for the 2024 season. The following football points of emphasis were selected by the NFHS Football Rules Committee for the 2024 high school football season. These 3 football points of emphasis need to be stressed to all coaches, game officials, players, parents, school administrators, appropriate healthcare professionals, and all others who have an interest in high school football. Those points of emphasis are sportsmanship and altercation prevention and protocols, player equipment and enforcement, and formations. The National Federation of State High School Associations, the state member associations, coaches, and game officials across the country are concerned as unsporting behavior in education-based athletics continues to escalate across all sports, especially in football. We need to be committed to a collaborative working relationship between coaches, players, and officials to promote good sportsmanship and to teach and enforce NFHS rules. Coaches, we need you to teach, promote, and model and set clear standards of behavior for themselves, players, and fans. When coaches are out of control, players typically follow suit, and then our spectators do as well, and this tends to lead to other things like fights or altercations because of just the heightened emotion of those kinds of behaviors. So we need coaches to do the best they can to work on modeling that proper behavior, and hopefully players and spectators will follow suit. And then game officials, we need to use the tools, use the rules in the rules book to address these kinds of things. When there's unsporting behavior, it needs to be addressed and penalized as necessary. And if we have to eject, then that's what we need to do. But typically when we have fights or other altercations, it's because we've allowed sportsmanship to deteriorate to the point that we're now in a physical fight or altercation. So we need to be on top of that from an officiating perspective. And then everyone involved just needs to understand this is an extension of the classroom. This is education-based athletics and activities, and we need to check our behaviors and aggression at the door. Football is an emotional game. It's hard to be successful in football without having some emotion, and you need to want to uh, block and hit people and those kinds of things and do it legally. But unsportsmanlike behavior, taunting and baiting, um, profanity, etc., has no place in high school football, and coaches and officials and players all need to work together to limit those kinds of behaviors. If we do have a fight, they do tend to end quickly. But if we have a big fight that escalates beyond that initial incident, um, that typically gets worse because players or coaches or potentially spectators in some cases come onto the field of play to participate in that fight. Just remember that if we do have an altercation and so on, anyone who leaves the bench area during an altercation is automatically ejected from the contest by rule. They don't get a freebie, they don't get a warning, As soon as they leave, whether they participate or not, from a player perspective or spectator perspective, they are ejected from the contest. Now, coaches can go onto the field to help break up fights, altercations, to help prevent, and they would not be penalized. But if coaches go onto the field to participate or to make the situation worse, would be ejected from the contest. But coaches, it's best to have this worked on, a practice, a protocol in place of what to do with your fellow coaches if something were to occur. And the best way to keep it from escalating is to have coaches who specifically address players and keep them from running onto the field and making the situation worse than it already is. So um, make sure you have a plan in place and execute that. But typically, it only gets worse when players or others come off the bench area. And if that's the case, players, non-playing personnel besides coaches would be ejected from the contest. Now, at the end of the game, the officials, as soon as they've declared the game is over, there's nothing for them to enforce penalty-wise and so forth. They are going to vacate the playing area. They still have authority at that time and can issue penalties, but they're typically going to vacate. And now we have the handshake line or those kinds of things. The responsibility of handling this time is on coaches and school administrators. They need to be there helping to monitor behaviors, and we need to follow the protocol for handshake lines by both teams. And there's more detailed information on fight de-escalation as well as handshake protocols that are on the dashboard from the NFHS. But ultimately, let's just get through the line. Let's be good sports. Coaches monitor the players, administrators monitor the players, and then go to the locker room or go to your separate space on the field, and you can do your post game at that point. But just make sure we're on top of behaviors, even during the handshake line. These can be pretty mundane, and they are 95+% of the time. But all it takes is one comment, taunting, baiting, and now we got an altercation on our hands. And in football, if you get ejected due to anything but a fight, for sure, you have the possibility that you're going to lose a very significant chunk of your season. So we just need to be really careful about this and monitor this. Again, not a problem the vast majority of the time, but it's pretty painful when we have these situations that probably could have been prevented by more supervision, more protocols, and just following good sportsmanship in general. The next point of emphasis is player equipment and enforcement, and we've been all over coaches and officials about this topic for many, many years, and we continue to see areas that we need to improve in, especially covering of the knees with pants and knee pads. And we know that the college level does a terrible job of it. They allow players to basically do and wear whatever they want, and our players see that at the high school level. They see it on TV and they follow suit, which makes it really difficult for our game officials to enforce it because they feel like they're constantly addressing that, which means we need the help of coaches. Coaches, tell your players, this is how you're expected to dress. Here are the rules. Here are the expectations. And have them dress that way. The officials don't want to get on you about it. They don't want to be uniform police. We need your help in this regard to clean this up. In that vein, the league is putting together a uniform and equipment poster. It should be out on dashboards and the central hub of the eligibility side of things on Arbiter for officials to view. And it will talk about all the things that are on the screen. So you see all the required equipment, what are the rules relative to towels and tights and mouth and oral protectors and helmets and shoes and all those kinds of things will be addressed on the poster. But for the most part, what you see on the screen is the main chunk, and the biggest issue we see, again, from year to year is knees not being covered by pants and knee pads. And we need coaches to be on that before games even start. And then officials, we need to be diligent about working with players, and then sending them off if they cannot comply. This topic with knee pads and covering the knees came up with the sports medicine committee from the NFHS, and the feedback from them was that due to potential injury, we cannot take this provision out of the rules book. Players need to wear knee pads that are appropriate. They need to be worn under the pant, and then the pant needs to completely cover the knee. So, um, again, coaches, please work with your players on this. Tell them this is how we expect you to dress, both equipment and uniform wise. And then officials work with coaches, work with the players to comply. And if they don't, you need to send them out until they can. Over the past several years, we have seen a considerable decline by many teams in their efforts to line up legally, and there has also been a decrease by game officials with respect to enforcement of illegal formations, especially involving those where offensive linemen are out of alignment. Remember that linemen are legally on the line of scrimmage when they face their opponent's goal line and have a head or foot breaking the imaginary plane through the waist of the snapper. It has become fairly common to see guards or tackles line up a yard or two off the ball to aid in pass blocking or pulling. This provides a significant advantage for the offense and needs to be addressed by coaches relative to coaching our formations and then game officials in enforcement. And then in addition, remember that a back is a team A player who has no part of his or her body breaking the plane of the waist of the nearest teammate who is on the line of scrimmage. So lineman is a player that's on the line and is intersecting that plane through the waistline of the snapper. Meanwhile, a back is someone who is not intersecting the plane of the waist of the nearest teammate. So that would be the tackle in most cases, like if we're talking about a slot. Now, if we have a player that is intersecting the waistline of the nearest teammate, but not the waistline of the snapper, that's no man's land and it is an illegal formation as well. So they either need to be back further enough to become a back, or they need to be up far enough so they are a lineman. And officials, if it's not egregious, but it is on the border of being a foul, we're going to give each team or each grouping a warning. So we're going to say a warning for the offense, a warning for the um, kicking team, for kicks, for scoring kicks, and then also for punts, we'd give a warning. Now, if a lineman or back and so forth lines up so that it's clearly illegal. So we have 5 players in the backfield. We have a right tackle that is 3 yards behind the waistline of the snapper and looks like a flying V. That is not a warning. That is a formation foul and needs to be called um, immediately. So one warning per group, and then after that, any formation issue is going to be addressed with an illegal formation foul. And again, we've talked about this on the previous slide. Um, again, linemen need to intersect the plane through the waist of the snapper, and if they are behind that considerably, that is an illegal formation foul and needs to be called immediately. If it is dicey or fairly close, we'll give that grouping a warning, and then we will have a foul for legal formation. So you see on the screen here, the right and left tackle are 2 yards behind the ball. This is not a warning. This is too far back. This is an illegal formation foul and one that we would want called. And again, as we talked about on the first slide, if an offensive player lines up by intersecting the waistline of the nearest teammate, so the left tackle in this particular example, but not the center, then team A has a player in no man's land. Now, when we have this kind of situation, officials, we're going to give them their first warning on this. If it's the second time, it's going to be a foul, but we need to communicate with the coach and the players, hey, I need the slot to move up and clearly become a lineman, or move back and clearly become a back. They can't be in between. If they do it a second time, it would be enough for for a foul. But if it's egregious, again, tackles 2-3 yards off the ball, so we um, don't have um, them in the right spot, that would be an illegal formation. And then if we have backs that are in no man's land, we got to work with them on that. But use your tools, communicate effectively, officials. We really needed to work with coaches and players, talk them through this stuff, especially early in the season. If it's not egregious, give them a warning for each grouping, and then after that, it would be a foul. Perhaps the most important part of the module is the Minnesota points of emphasis, and many of these things are points of emphasis at the national level as well, but we continue to see areas that we need to have growth and improvement in, especially evolving around um, player safety. So we need to be on top of that, diligent on that. We've made progress for sure, but there's still area of growth and improvement that we need to see. And this is going to take the collective work of coaches and officials to make this happen. So coaches teaching safer techniques, officials call fouls when they happen, especially safety related fouls. Um, and players will adjust. They have done a really good job of adjusting to targeting, even though we still need to emphasize that. We've gotten better at it, but we need to continue to coach it. We need to continue to officiate it, and then players will adjust and will play the game in a safer manner. So, again, always a need to improve, always need to look at safety relative to targeting and excessive and unnecessary contact. That's important for the continued health of high school football, which we all love. That's why we're here to coach and play it and officiate it, because it's a great game and it's given so much to all of us. And the only way we're going to protect that is by making sure that we make this game as safe as we can by coaching it the safest way, playing it the safest way, and officiating it um, to the letter of the rule when we're talking about safety related fouls. So this slide has been an emphasis for quite a while, and I would say that we have done a really good job as coaches and officials of really reducing the amount of targeting that we see in our game. And we need players to see what they hit, to not deliver, take aim, and forcibly contact players in the head and neck area. Not just for the protection of the player that's being hit, but for the one that's delivering the blow as well. So remember that targeting does not have to involve a launch. It could. That's an indicator that we could potentially have targeting. Um, but as long as we have a player that's taking aim and delivering that contact, that punishing blow to the head or neck area, we are going to have a targeting foul. And remember, it does not have to be made with the helmet. Helmet to helmet is nowhere to be found in the rules book. Can it be a foul when the helmet's hit? Yes, it can. Um, but we could have cases where there's incidental contact, it rides up, etc. So not all helmet to helmet contact is a foul, but when they take aim and initiate that contact with the head or neck area using forearm, knee, shoulder, or helmet, those kinds of things, then we're going to have a targeting foul. And it's not an automatic ejection in high school. It's 15 yards, but if it's flagrant, completely unnecessary, didn't need to happen, then we need to consider ejection in that case. And we just need to lower our target zone. We need to use wrap up technique when it comes to tackling to really avoid targeting fouls. And remember that targeting is only what the player did and what ultimately occurred. It's not what they meant to do or they thought they were going to do something, because we hear that all the time, that I didn't mean to do that. Well, ultimately you took aim and you initiated contact, forceful contact in the head or neck area. That's a targeting foul. And we especially see that when offensive players in particular go low because they're going to the ground, they're sliding, those kinds of things. That does not absolve the defensive player or the player that's delivering the blow from delivering that hit legally. So again, we're doing a great job as coaches and players of adjusting, and officials are much better at recognizing these fouls and calling them. but we need to continue our emphasis and diligence as it relates to player safety and targeting. Coaches must also continue to work with their players, and they have, about the risks of unnecessary and excessive contact, regardless of whether or not the contact occurs during a legal block or tackle. So we need to instruct our players to avoid that kind of contact. Really stress that in practice and at games, and officials, we need to call the fouls when this kind of thing happens. So um, again, taking aim on opponents who are not aware of impending contact, so they're defenseless by rule. They're especially vulnerable to injury, and if we're going to have forceful contact against them, it needs to be a foul. Blindside blocks, targeting, um, you know, roughing the passer, those kinds of fouls um, need to be called. We need to try to coach that out of the game, and players need to adjust so that we can have the safest game that we possibly can have. Again, with risk minimization, we need officials to be aware of situations where this illegal contact typically occurs. And most of the time that happens on blindside blocks, peelbacks, um, when airborne receivers are attempting to secure the ball, a quarterback who's passing the ball and doesn't know that contact is coming. These players are, again, vulnerable to injury. And when we have excessive, unnecessary, forceful contact against these players in those vulnerable positions, that's pretty dangerous, and we need to call those types of fouls. When we leave our feet and initiate contact with defenseless opponents, it needs to be penalized immediately. And again, if it's unnecessary or excessive, we should consider flagrant and ejection if that's the case. If there's any doubt that a foul occurred, call the foul and enforce a 15-yard penalty. When in doubt, if it's an ejection, then we're going to leave them in the game. And when we're talking about roughing the passer as well, remember that what we're looking for is high, low, late, and punishing. If it fits any of those four categories, then it needs to be a foul. Again, we need to lower our target zone in many cases. We don't want to hurt players. It doesn't mean that we can't have hard contact. We can, but these players that are vulnerable to injury, we need to be on top of that as coaches and officials. Make sure they use proper technique by rule. And this includes the rules change last year that says that airborne receivers are defenseless. And the only way that they can be contacted with force is when you initiate contact with open hands or use a wrap-up tackle technique. We did not do a very good job last year with that. We had several instances where receivers just got totally blown up and we didn't have a foul. That needs to change in 2024. That was a rules change last year. It's an emphasis this year. If it's a defenseless receiver and they initiate forceful contact with them, it needs to be initiated with open hands or they need to use a wrap-up tackle technique. I would say this slide can probably go away in another year because coaches and players have done an outstanding job of adjusting to this. This used to be commonplace, this kind of philosophy that, well, we didn't hear a whistle, so we're just going to keep hitting people. And again, coaches and players have done an awesome job of adjusting to this. We know when the play's over. When the play's over, whether you hear a whistle or not, the play's over, and we're not going to keep hitting people and delivering huge blocks, especially cleaning up the pile or coming in and blowing up the runner who's already being held up by other defensive players are just some examples. On many plays, the officials won't even have a whistle because they don't know where the football is. So remember that, coaches, that if the officials don't see the football, they cannot blow the whistle, because if they blow the whistle without seeing the football, they're guessing on whether that player is down by rule. So there's some plays where there's going to be a big pile up and there's no whistle, but that's not a license to go and pick people off the pile and go smash people after the play is over. And again, I'll just emphasize it. Coaches and players have done an awesome job of adjusting this on this, but make sure we don't lose progress. Let's keep up the good work, and officials stay diligent on this, especially when the play is coming to an end, near piles, etc., to make sure that we're not having anything extremely late and so forth. If it's really, really late, that's an unsportsmanlike conduct foul. Um, we can't have that in our game. It needs to be eliminated. And coaches, players, awesome job. Keep it up. But officials, stay diligent. Let's stay on top of these types of actions. So again, talked about jerseys earlier with the rules change and the emphasis on the clearly contrasting language, but a reminder that if you have a jersey that are longer than the top of the pants, they need to be tucked in. And if they are shorter, they're not going to work. So they can go right to the top of the pant and stay out, that's fine. But if they're longer, they need to be tucked in. And then further, the shirt beneath the jersey, if worn, a t-shirt, etc., that must be tucked in and not visible. We continue to see issues with illegal equipment and adornments, especially with eye shields. And um, we had to have a discussion with a team about a player at Prep Bowl last year that was using a eye shield that had tint in the shield. Remember that eye shields have to be constructed of a molded rigid material. Um, Specified manufacturing guidelines are followed. And then third, and the most important one, the one that we typically see violations with, it has to be absolutely clear, 100% clear, no tint. It can't look like a mirror. We even saw an example last year, not in Minnesota, but in the country, where the shield had blinking lights on it. That is not legal. It has to be clear, and a doctor cannot provide a doctor's note or letter saying that this player has an eye condition and needs to use a tinted eye shield. Remember that players can wear sunglasses or other eyewear over their face directly, but as a shield, an eye shield, that has to be 100% clear or it can't be worn. And then we tried getting the rule changed relative to play cards. That did not pass at the NFHS this year. Unfortunately, in my mind, it didn't pass. So play cards that are not worn on the wrist or arm are illegal, and they either need to be fixed or taken off. And typically what we see there is play cards dangling from the waist area. So um, not legal if they're not on the wrist or arm. And then if any equipment that is not worn properly or becomes illegal through play and is detected, the officials need to work with them to fix it. If they can't fix it, then they need to leave the field for at least a down until it can be corrected. And coaches, again, take a look at the uniform poster, work with your players on this prior to the season so we don't have issues with it as we go along. We're way better than we used to be, but we still see issues with illegal equipment, especially eye shields. On this slide, you see the player with the football has an illegal jersey because it cannot cover the shoulder pad appropriately. If it can't cover the shoulder pad, it's not legal. Now, the jerseys for both teams in this shot are illegal. So let's take a look at the player in the middle. He has a body color of the number that is black on a gray jersey. This is dark on dark. This is not legal. We would highly recommend against having gray uniform tops because they're typically not going to be dark enough to be considered dark. It has to be over that 70% threshold. So we just do not recommend gray at all. We recommend the darkest color of your school's school color scheme for your uniforms. And then we can't have a dark number on a dark jersey. And then conversely, you see the visiting team has a white jersey with a white number on it. And even though the trim contrasts with white, the trim has nothing to do with the rule any longer. It has to be clearly contrasting between the color of the body of the number and the jersey top. And so white on white, light on white does not work. That is not compliant. And then you see the shirt in the middle does not cover the shoulder pad and has dark on dark, and that is not compliant either. This slide further clarifies that the jersey must completely cover the shoulder pads and all pads worn above the waist on the torso. So you see in the picture there that number 15 has his jersey so that it does not cover the back pad there. That needs to be covered. If you have a flak jacket on and so forth, that needs to be covered by the jersey. And we see that a lot, and we need players to either comply or they need to leave the field for at least one down until it can be fixed. This slide has been in the online rules module for close to a decade. And the reason it's still in the module is that we continue to see issues with these kinds of things. So starting with the player on the left, we have a back pad that is exposed. It's not covered by the jersey, and that needs to be addressed. We need to make sure that we only have one tooth and mouth protector and so forth. And then you see the player on the right, clearly the knee pad and pant are not covering the knees. And again, coaches, please work with them prior to the game, prior to the season, about what is expected for uniforms and equipment. And then officials, we need to address this. If they can't comply, send them out for at least a down until they can. So make sure that we're on top of this, coaches and officials. We can continue to see issues with appropriate and legal uniforms and equipment. We made a few tweaks to the Minnesota Mechanics Illustrated document, and we recommend that you review the document that you received in the mail with all of the changes and so forth. We recommend that you get your nose in that book because, again, these are the expected mechanics for varsity officials in 2024. The NFHS has a football game officials manual committee, and they chose the following points of emphasis for the 2024-2025 high school football season. Now, Minnesota has its own Minnesota Mechanics Manual. Again, you received that in the mail. But Mike Spanier, our state coordinator, serves on the NFHS Manual Committee, and we continue to work with them on standardizing and streamlining mechanics across the country for football game officials. And typically, we have used the point of emphasis from the NFHS Game Officials Manual Committee because they are really good things we need to work on, even though we don't use their manual. So we're going to be stressing these things to all coaches, game officials, and players, that we need to be on top of pregame administration and how we handle that, clock management and clock awareness, and then the importance of dead ball officiating throughout the game. The first area of focus from the Game Officials Mechanics Committee is pregame administration. Remember that game administration and our duties doesn't just start at kickoff. So we need to be in touch with the school and our crewmates earlier in the week to make sure that we're aware of logistics and expectations for the contest that we're working that particular week. So we need to contact the school, send them our eligibility badges, ask about parking, locker rooms, any special events, all those kinds of things. We need to touch base with the school earlier in the week and our crewmates. Have some kind of a pregame to prepare, so get some pregame topics, talk about it in the car ride, or get to the site early and have those discussions so we can be ready for the game. Because again, administration doesn't just start when the ball gets kicked off. And then when we get to the stadium, the field, and so on, and we're going to have our pregame, we should do that, but then we need to be on the field at least 30 minutes before kick because we're going to meet with both head coaches, we're going to meet with the timers, we're going to inspect the field, we're going to make sure it's a safe place, and then we're going to work some plays and watch them warm up and actively officiate those kinds of situations. We're not going to just stand around and watch. We see a lot of crews do that. They just go to the corner of the field and just sit there. And that's a time to take care of the footballs. Again, the clock people, the chains, all sorts of responsibilities and tasks that need to be done in that 30 minutes. So we really don't have time to stand around. We need to be really active in that pregame setting to put us in the right frame of mind to be successful that night on the field. The second area that we're looking at as an emphasis is clock awareness, especially during time sensitive situations at the end of the second and fourth period in particular. Um, we just can't be on top of it at one point or another. We need to be on top of it throughout the game. And it's not just the referee, it's not just the back judge, it's everybody. We need to be on top of clock status, know what it needs to be doing. Because again, when time is a factor where we have a score, field position, timeouts that are available or not, injuries and penalty enforcement, if we aren't ready for those situations, we're gonna look unprepared, unprofessional, and we're going to be in a bad spot. So we just need to be on top of that, be diligent on clock awareness, especially at time critical parts of the game, and just overall clock understanding. So, for example, we had a game last year, onside kick, K recovers, they keep on running, we eventually get it shut down, but by then 4 or 5 seconds had run off the game clock. We get the ball back to where it was recovered initially, which was good, but we didn't put 5 seconds back on the game clock. And that was the difference between K having a chance to go down and try to kick a field goal and not scoring any points. And so that's on the whole crew to be aware of the clock, and we just need to be better at that as an overall group. And then secondly, we need to be aware of situations where the play clock will be set to 25 seconds or 40. If we have a injury or helmet off for team B, we're going to have a 40-second play clock, no matter what it's combined with from the offense. So keep that in mind. And then when we have a defensive foul only, not offsetting fouls or multiple fouls, we would have a 40-second play clock in that situation. So let's just be aware of that. If we have a foul by both teams, the play clock will be set to 25 seconds, and then clock status will be affected by the result of the play and the type of fouls we're talking about and so forth. But let's be aware of the situations where it should be set to 25 versus 40. And then finally, we need to be efficient in placing the ball on the ground at the end of the play between 28 and 32 seconds remaining on the play clock. Unless time is a factor, then we need to hustle, get the ball down on the ground, and get to our position as umpires going sideline to sideline. And then referees, when we have a first down inbounds, as soon as the umpire gets the ball in their hands, we're going to wind the game clock, even if the ball is not on the ground and the ball's not ready for play until the officials are in position to officiate. So we need to wind the game clock. We did a much, much better job of that last year. Lots of good examples in the postseason. So keep it up, but let's be efficient on getting the game clock started. Now, if clock is a factor, last couple minutes of the second and fourth quarter, we're not going to wind it up right away. Umpires will put the ball down, they'll get to their position, and then it will be whistle, 1-1000, 2-1000, and wind our arm, and then they can snap it after the whistle, and we're just going to be much more efficient with clock administration if we do that. So as a crew, be on top of clock awareness, be on top of clock options. A foul in the last 2 minutes, we need to be on top of that. Just a lot of things to be on top of in our dead ball officiating, which is the next points of emphasis. And the other point of emphasis from the NFHS is dead ball officiating, and whatever happens in the dead ball period is totally under our control. We can get in there and have a presence. We can get in there and use our voice. And then we can penalize if necessary to keep control of the football game. And what happens during the play, we can't control. We can't control if they pass ball, catch it, fumble, whatever. But we can control what happens in the dead ball period by diligently observing players during the dead ball periods, making sure they're not picking people off piles and so forth, making sure that we do penalty administration correctly. That's during the dead ball period under our control. And then that's not just the referee's responsibility either, just like clocks, that's the whole crew needs to be on top of penalty administration. Um, Use the tools you have, you know, talk to the players, tell them that you're here. Hey, easy, easy. Use the ground to get up. Don't use players. Those kind of things, and then compliment them when they do a good job. And hopefully, they will continue to handle dead ball periods appropriately. It's not a time for a break. We don't get to just take a deep breath and say, "Oh, I don't have to do anything anymore." We need to be really focused, especially during that time. And if we get to the end of the game and we are mentally exhausted, that means that we have truly focused and have really worked hard to be good dead ball officials. And then finally, just a reminder that if we have two unsportsmanlike fouls or a flagrant foul, that would result in an ejection, not two personal fouls. Now, again, if it's a flagrant personal foul, they would be ejected for that. But if it's two personal fouls, that's not grounds for ejection. Um, Two unsportsmanlike fouls or a flagrant foul are the only things that would result in ejection. We talked about this earlier in the presentation about a reminder on the change last year to intentional grounding to say that only the player that controls or possesses that initial snap gets grounding protection. Now, from an officiating perspective, we need to understand landmarks. Remember, umpires, you're on the left foot of the tackle with your right foot. If the quarterback or passer crosses your face, you're going to officiate inside out. And if they cross your face, they are out of the free blocking zone. Referees, you are a little wider in your initial position, so you need to have an understanding of when that passer gets outside of the free blocking zone. And typically, if they take 2 steps, 3, to either side, they're going to be outside of the free blocking zone. And remember our philosophy, when in doubt, they are outside of the free blocking zone. So that player, again, that controls the initial snap is the only player that gets grounding protection. Remember that if the passer has not met both requirements in exception 2, it remains a foul if there's no eligible offensive receiver in the area, which we talked about earlier what that looks like. Um, we're going to give the players benefit of the doubt. They're really good athletes. If we think at all in our mind that they have a chance to make a play on that ball, we're going to give them all sorts of chances to say that an eligible receiver was in the area. So um, if they throw it at the feet of the running back or receiver, no problem. Even if they have their backs to them, as long as that ball's within 5 yards of them, we're going to say that it's good. Okay. Um, Many game officials choose to ignore this foul when there's an eligible offensive receiver in the general area of the forward pass. But if the referee judges that the forward pass was intentionally thrown incomplete, it is a foul. So this takes good crew communication, and how we do that is referee or umpire, depending on which way the passer goes, you're going to close on the dead ball action, close on the passer, and then you're going to stay there. If you turn and you see an official coming to you, they're telling you that there either was not a receiver in the area, an eligible receiver in the area, and or the pass did not cross the neutral zone and the neutral zone extended. And that means you probably have a problem, and stay there. They'll come to you, they'll tell you that information. Then you can drop a flag for intentional grounding if the passer did not vacate the free blocking zone. So it's a crew call. It's not just referee throwing the flag or umpire throwing the flag. We need information from other officials to piece that together. And remember, just because they ran the wrong route does not buy them out of intentional grounding. So if the quarterback is about to get hit and is in the free blocking zone and throws it to the deep right corner and there's no one there, that is intentional grounding. It doesn't matter if the receiver ran the wrong route. Um, that's not in the rule. All it has in there is that the passer did not vacate the free blocking zone and they threw it either to an area not occupied by an eligible receiver, or the pass did not cross the neutral zone or the neutral zone extended. And remember, when in doubt, the passer is outside the free blocking zone. When in doubt, the pass made the neutral zone or the neutral zone extended. And when in doubt, an eligible receiver is in the area. We did a really good job last year in making improvements on our free kick mechanics. What we were seeing was many cases where umpires and back judges were not letting K cross their face and then coming onto the field to officiate inside out. We were still staying on the sideline, and that's not the mechanic that's in our manual. And as you see on the slide, you see the zones of coverage and responsibility that we have on free kicks. And we need to get our eyes to our zone and pick up the threats and stay with that threat until you've cleared it, and then you can move on to the next one. And it's almost all zone coverage once we have a return and we get our eyes to point of attack blocks, especially out front. So again, we've done a much better job of this, but remember, we need, as umpires and back judges, we need to let K cross our face and then come onto the field and officiate inside out. Back judges, you're going to have goal line coverage and line of scrimmage. You will too, but ultimately we're not running up there like crazy, not worrying about the forward progress spot. We're going to move up field in a calm manner and pick up blocks and so on, and then get forward progress once we've cleared all of the blocks. Onside kicks are especially challenging. Um, they don't happen a lot, and when they do, they tend to be really chaotic. So um, if we know one's coming or likely to come, then we're going to bump everybody up. The line scrimmage officials will go up there. Referee will stay back behind the deepest return player, but everyone else needs to bump up. And it's the responsibility of the officials on kickers restraining line to deal with encroachment. And remember, we're going to rule that like a plane. So if they even break that plane before the ball is kicked, that is a foul, and we're going to shut it down immediately. If we have a pop-up kick, that is the responsibility of the officials on ours restraining line to shut it down immediately. If we have a kick that gets off legally and so on, then the responsibility for touching, legal touching by K is going to be the officials on ours restraining line, and no one is coming onto the field on onside kicks. We're going to officiate from 2 yards deep into the sideline. Make sure that the clock starts if it needs to, and then we can shut it down because like the example I talked about during the clock awareness piece, that was an onside kick and we weren't ready to handle the clock side of things when it comes to onside kicks. And then finally, one of the most challenging pieces in onside kicks is whether K is legal to block. So they cannot block Team R until they are eligible to touch the ball. So if the ball is not gone 10 yards, they can't block. And that's responsibility of the officials on K's restraining line to pick up illegal blocks. And that's really hard. I get that. That's why it's reviewable and replay at other levels of play. It's really hard. But we need to just focus in, pick up the ball, status of the ball. If we have blocks prior to the ball going 10 yards, then we would have a foul. Don't split hairs and don't guess. If you're not sure, then leave it go. But if you're on top of focusing, we should be able to pick that up. We continue to see issues with scrimmage kick mechanics, particularly with back judge positioning. Our referee and umpire positioning, line of scrimmage, initial positioning, we've done a really good job with that. We've really done well there. Let's keep it up. Referee and umpire, you're going to be about 3 to 4 yards deep of the kicker, and then you're going to be in your typical spot. Umpires and then referees, you're wider, and then once the kick is away, we're just going to officiate zone coverage. So basically dividing the field in half and officiate zone. And then the person that is in the line judge position is going to release at the snap, and then the official who is on the down judge side with the chains, they are not going to release until the ball is kicked, and then they're not going to go as far down because the back judge is going to assist on that side of the field. And then back judges, we need to be roughly 5 to 7 yards um, off to the side of the chains, uh, 5 to 7 yards deep, and then about 3, 4, 5 yards wide of that widest return player. We tend to be all over the place, and it puts us out of position to officiate um, kick catch interference. We have trouble assisting with blocks as they're coming down the field, and also it affects our depth with regards to a kicking team player being blocked into the return player. And we don't have a true idea of whether that occurred because we're too close, or our depth or width is not where it needs to be. It puts us out of position. So let's have that as our initial position, and then adjust as the return player is adjusting to a place where you can see whether they touch the ball. We don't need to be in their hip pocket, and we never want the ball to beat us to the goal line and bounce over our head and those kinds of things. So let's really work on back judge mechanics on punts. We've struggled a little bit in that area, and especially in our initial positioning. And then once it's possessed and we get the beanbag down, we need to turn our attention to blocks and release forward progress in most cases to the line of scrimmage officials. Line of scrimmage officials, you've done a great job of adjusting and doing the required mechanics. It seems hard at times. We get it, as far as we're not releasing until the pass is imminent on pass plays, and we've done a good job of staying home, and that's helped us officiate low blocks a lot better from the line of scrimmage, and it's helped us with forward progress on plays that turn into runs because we're not having happy feet. We're only releasing when the pass is imminent, and we're allowing the back judge to really take ownership of those long pass plays. And again, we switch at halftime. We've done a really good job of that. Both of you should meet with the chains prior to the game. We talked about game administration as an emphasis. Both of you should meet with the chain crew members since you'll be working with them. And then finally, don't guard air. So if the play goes away from you, move to the next threat. Move to the next set of players to officiate. Once you've cleared that threat, move on to the next one. And that may mean you need to come onto the field as a line of scrimmage official. That's okay. Come onto the field, get a little bit closer, pick up that next possible illegal block or players that are near each other. We need to get our vision to that, clear that, and then we can move on to the next set of players to work. We've done a really good job of this. Just a reminder that we need to stay home and then make sure that we're not guarding air relative to player safety. Again, talked about this in a previous slide. Umpires, you have done an amazing job of adjusting on our mechanics. Remember, right foot on the left foot of the tackle, about 14 yards deep. We're going to maintain that spot. Don't go left or right. If you're going to move at all, you're going to go straight backwards, because if the passer crosses your face, you now turn and officiate inside out, as we talked about before, and now you have responsibility for the passer. So you're going to call roughing the passer. You might have a flag down for intentional grounding. You're going to rule on pass fumble. And we have done an amazing job with that. Keep up the good work. If you have questions about that, reach out to a coordinator, and they can help you. But for the most part, we have done a good job with that. And remember, we're going to take that passer or quarterback, either way, into the side zone. Especially if they go into the opponent's bench area, we need to have a physical presence over there and bring them out onto the field. And then after that, we can handle our ball mechanics. And there is a ball mechanics reference, one pager in the mechanics manual. Please review that with your crew, especially with the referee, relative to ball mechanics. We can get a lot more efficient with that, and we need referees to help out with ball mechanics. So please review the ball mechanics document in the mechanics manual. We've done a really good job with offensive holding across the state, as well as just recognition of what is a quality foul. One that clearly has an impact, especially getting safety related fouls, as we've talked about many times in this module. But with offensive holding in particular, as an emphasis the last couple of years, we've done a much better job of making sure that these are quality fouls and ones that are clearly impacting the players that are being blocked. So first, make it be there. Obvious, clear fouls, ones we need to have, and when we're evaluating these types of blocks and whether they're legal or not, again, we're asking ourselves, is it at the point of attack? If you answer yes, then we move on to the next question. Does it have a material restriction on the player being blocked? And that's not just running through a little bit of a jersey grab or barely getting grabbed. If they run right through it, that's not enough material restriction. Now, it doesn't take much. If their shoulder gets dipped, they get spun in a circle, certainly takedowns and so on. Um, that's enough at the point of attack to have material restriction. And then if you can put it in that category, grab and restrict, hook and restrict, takedown, those kinds of categories, if you can do that, it's a foul and one we want called. And remember, our enforcement on those penalties is a little different than it's been, relative to previous spot and so forth. But if they tackle somebody, even if it's not at the point of attack, they just flat out tackle somebody, that is a foul for offensive holding. We do want that called. Those are egregious and we need to have those. But if it's marginal contact, don't want those. If it's not a material restriction that rises to the level of a takedown or a tackle and it's not at the point of attack, we don't want those called either. And we've done a good job of calling real big quality fouls for the most part and leaving the ticky-tack stuff go. So keep up the good work with that. Be diligent about it. Look at blocks where you're supposed to. Quality fouls only. Point of attack, yes. Material restriction, yes. What category? And if you do, we would have a foul for offensive holding. Let's cover a few administrative reminders before concluding this module. The NFHS has a new website called All Access, which is the digital publications platform for rules publications, High School Today magazine, as well as other NFHS digital publications like casebooks and so forth, where you can register on the All Access website and then you can get access to these digital publications, and that's at allaccess.nfhs.org. Once you go on to the All Access website and get registered, you would then download the mobile app either on the App Store or Google Play, and the app allows you to purchase these digital publications and you can view them anywhere. You can highlight pieces of that, you can create notes, and then you can search for specific terms of either the rules book or casebook or any other digital publication that's available. So you'll download the app and then purchase those digital publications within the app. The NFHS Learning Center is home to more than 90 online professional development courses for everyone within the interscholastic community, including coaches, students, officials, parents, and administrators. There are more than 60 courses of the 90 plus that are available for free. Go to nfhslearn.com to register and to learn more about these courses. As you can see on the slide, over 21 million courses have been delivered on a number of topics that are very important to coaches and officials, as well as parents and administrators. And it's just really important to be on top of many of these topics throughout the season, especially in football when it comes to dealing with heat and concussion and injury and so forth. Just really important to be aware of those things, and NFHS Learn provides opportunities to view these courses, and again, many of them are available for free. There's a new free online course called Implicit Bias from the NFHS Learning Center. Implicit bias is the automatic reaction we have towards other people based on our past learning and expectations. Studies show that implicit bias affects the experiences of students in school athletic and activity programs. The NFHS has partnered with Project Implicit to bring you this course, Implicit Bias. Studies support that there is a relationship between implicit bias and real-world behavior,
which highlights the importance of being aware of and managing your bias. This course defines and illustrates examples of implicit bias and provides research on how it impacts our society.
As we mentioned previously, there are a number of courses on nfhslearn.com that are important to coaches and their work with student athletes throughout the season. And these include concussion in sports, heat illness prevention, and sudden cardiac arrest. Unfortunately, we've seen issues with all three of those things and more. And so, again, just really important for coaches to be aware of resources that are out there, and many of them available again on nfhslearn.com. The 2024 football coordinator staff includes Mike Graff, who will cover the southeast part of Minnesota, Rich Stolp, southwest, Bill Mills, the west central part of the state, along with Mike Cannon, our newest regional coordinator. Steve Fillion, the northwest part of the state, and Paul McDonald will cover the northeast. Our state coordinator is Mike Spanier. Contact your regional coordinator or state coordinator with any questions in regards to rules, officials mechanics, or officiating. Their contact information is available on both the coach's dashboard and on the Arbiter Central Hub page.